Genetics, my favorite chapter, by the way. Just putting that out there.
So that isn't hard?
Nope. But here's what happens with genetics, which I love to say this in the video. If you do not know this vocabulary, like you're having a conversation with me about going out on Friday night, you are doomed because the vocabulary is applied throughout the whole chapter. So you have to know these words and understand what they mean. So you already did an assignment, so let's go over it. What is inherited information on DNA? Genes. So there's a picture, and we're going to get more into DNA and genes, but there's a picture of DNA, which houses chromosomes and genes, okay? What do they contain? Alleles is how we express them, okay? It's a form of a gene, and it's how we express them.
How do you pronounce that?
Allele. How do we express alleles? Using what? No, they represent genes. How do we express them? Using letters. Good. And in this case, it's going to be capital letters and lowercase letters. Okay? So alleles are a form of a gene, and they express genes with letters, and the letters are only going to be capital or lowercase. The next is trait. A trait is a form of like something that's expressed. Genes form traits, and that's what you see, right? And there's words to describe that. When both alleles are the same, and the same means, so if you want to underline the word same and put in parentheses 2 capital letters or 2 lowercase letters. Purebred or, good job. Purebred or homozygous for a trait. So again, by saying same, I'm saying 2 capital letters or 2 lowercase letters for their genetic makeup or their alleles. When alleles are different, that means 1 capital letter, 1 lowercase letter, heterozygous. Homo means same, hetero means different. So try to remember that. So genotype is basically what? What do these letters represent? Alleles. So it's an allele combination or a gene combination. That's all it is. Think of the word gene. You're going to look at genes, and genes are expressed as alleles. Yes? Phenotype means what?
Things that show.
Things that show. Physical characteristics or your physical appearance. It's what you see or what is expressed because of your genetic makeup. What's a dominant allele? What does the word dominant mean?
Like
taking over. I love it. Taking over, overpowering. When you have a dominant allele, it's going to hide or mask the recessive. Okay? So the recessive is basically the one that is being hidden if a dominant allele is with it. To express genotypes, what do we use again? Alleles, which are always expressed with letters. We're going to use the first letter of the dominant trait to represent the alleles, okay? So, for example, if we're going to talk about the trait for height, and tall is dominant to short, what alleles are we going to use? T. T for dominant, capital, and little t for recessive. Who is the father of genetics? What did he do? He tested on pea plants, and he came up with the hypothesis of inheritance or heredity. He discovered genes, you could say. And he crossbred pea plants, as you mentioned. Whoops. Why? Why pea plants? Because he was like, oh, I like peas.
Okay.
I can't believe I did
I
that.
have a couple reasons. Because, one, they grow fast.
Grow fast.
Easily, like, observable traits.
Awesome.
And they were...
They're easy to grow. They reproduce quickly and fast and a lot. And their traits are super easy to observe. I think I have a picture of their traits right here. These are all the traits. Round, color, shape, color, things that you could see easily and very limited amounts of variation. Right, of course. So he cross-fertilized pea plants, which means he bred them, okay? He took a male and a female component, put them together. Of what type of parents? Homozygous parents or purebred. He wanted purebred parents because he wanted to see what chance of offspring was going to occur from crossing them. What did he call his offspring? F1 or what? If you don't know, look at the diagram and the answer should be there for you. Hybrids. Good. So, if I was to ask you questions like this, what can you tell me about this capital P and capital P? Right now, based on the vocabulary we just covered. They're dominant traits. How do we know this? Capital letters. What else? They're homozygous. What else? They're purebred. What else? What are these letters? They're alleles. What else? These letters represent the organism's what?
Genotype.
Nope. Letters represent genotype. Okay? Now,
Doesn't the genotype determine
the genotype determines the phenotype, but these letters represent the genotype. That's going to be on the test. The color represents the phenotype. Okay? What can you tell me about little p, little p? Recessive. What else? Homozygous. What else? Purebred. What else?
They're hidden.
Well, not really.
Well, like, they will be.
They show the recessive trait because they're both together.
But they're about to be.
Here, it's hidden. Capital P, little p, it's hidden because the dominant trait masks the recessive.
I have a question.
Yep.
Aren't
Question comes up every single year, every single period, every single. So you asked if something is heterozygous, does any of the recessive traits show up? And the answer is normally no. Only in the genotype do you see the recessive trait. But there are special cases, and I'm going to cover that at the end of the unit. So I would say except sometimes, really quietly for now. Because the reality is, it's a principle of dominance, and the dominant gene always masks the recessive, except sometimes. So genetically, or the genotype shows the recessive trait, but the phenotype does not. So this is what Mendel concluded, hypothesized after he did several of these experiments. That there are alternative forms of genes, and they're called alleles. And each organism has how many for each trait? 2. So for every gene or every trait, you have 2. One comes from mother and the other one from the father. Good. If the 2 alleles are the same, the organism is homozygous.
Yes.
If 2 alleles are different, heterozygous. The allele that masks is the dominant, and the allele that does not appear if it's heterozygous is the recessive. 2 alleles separate during the formation of what? When do your alleles separate?
Oh, I know. Locusts.
Good job. What do we call sex cells? Gametes. Awesome. So then he crossed. If you look at this, what is he crossing now? Raise your hand. The hybrids, which are also called the... what do we call the hybrids? F1s. So he took the offspring, which is the F1 generation, and you could call it F1 times F1, or hybrid times hybrid, or hetero times hetero, yeah? And look what he got. The white popped back up. So he was like, hey, the white gene, even though I can't see it, has to still be present in the generation. So he developed these principles. The principle of dominance, which I'm going to cover, the principle of segregation, and the principle of independent assortment. And he called his offspring from the hybrid cross a F2 generation, which makes sense, right? Oh, here we go again. Principle of dominance says what? Dominant allele always masks the recessive. So I'm going to give you a scenario, and this is how the test is always going to be. I'm always going to give you some scenario, and you got to work out from there. So if I tell you round is dominant to wrinkled, what am I giving you, this information? What is round and what is wrinkled? Tell me what vocabulary words match with that. Can anybody? Round is what? A trait. What else? A gene? No.
Or phenotype.
Phenotype. So that's all you could tell me. So if I tell me what round and wrinkled is, you could say trait and phenotype. All right. Now, what letters are we going to use?
Round. T and
Shh. Raise your hand.
T.
No.
R.
Why?
That's round.
Because we're using the first letter of the dominant trait. Now, that's not an official fact, but that's what we're using in my class, so it's consistent across the board. And it's the way most genotypes are expressed. So round, we're going to use capital R and lowercase r. What is round going to be? Capital R, or capital R, lowercase r, because the dominant mass are recessive.
What happens when the dominant trait?
What are we going to use for wrinkled?
Capital W.
Lowercase r's. We only use the capital letter of the dominant trait. So Mendel's purebred homozygous cross of this would be what? Tell me what genotypes? Capital R times. Good. And what's the offspring? Which is all. What are they? Heterozygous, hybrid, F1 generation. Good job. It's 2 words. Guys, everything that we do in genetics is probability, okay? When we do crossing of parents, we're doing it to see what are the possibilities of specific traits in offspring. It is not, if I have 4 kids, my first kid is going to be this, my second, it is every time I have kids, these are the possibilities of my offspring. That's what genetic Punnett squares are designed for, or crossing of parents.